Molly Goddard, welcome to SHOWstudio. First question, I read in a past interview that you've done, you said my least favourite things are prim, proper and pretty, which in a way I think people would be surprised by, because I think a lazy journalist would perhaps describe your work as prim, proper and pretty. How would you describe your work?
I don't know if I probably did say that, but I do kind of think that. I do like pretty. I suppose it's more the kind of associations with everything else that you kind of get. The minute you do something pink and frilly, you get it turns into something that is prim and proper, and I'm not very prim and proper. So I suppose that's what I don't like about that. But what did you say? How would I describe my clothes? There is something very pretty about them, and I like that. I think the main thing for me is that they've got a lot of craft and kind of time and energy has gone into the making of them, but I would say it's more kind of about fun. They're quite fun to wear.
Yes, I think there's a sense of when you wear one of your pieces or when you see one of your shows, it feels like the model's wearing a sensation rather than sort of wearing a garment. Like it's about a feeling rather than a piece. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, I think the casting for me is very important. So the process of casting is more what I mean. Like I work with my sister Alice, and we use girls that we know quite well, girls we've known before, girls that are friends, and not necessarily professional models. And so like you get to know them and what they feel comfortable wearing. And so a lot of it for me is I don't want someone to turn up the night before the show and throw something on that they kind of don't have any relationship with. I quite like the girls to kind of get excited about what they're wearing, and I really enjoy that process. So yeah, like it's about them liking what they've got on and interacting with it in some way, I suppose. Yeah.
And talk to me a bit about the silhouette, because your clothes have a very defined shape, and it sits somewhere between, like sometimes it's almost quite infantile, quite childlike. It looks like children's clothing in a way, but then there is an element to it, which, as you say, is quite almost historical, and it could be, like riffing off a piece of historical dress. But I think it's definitely, it's also a silhouette which is quite bold in the sense of it really doesn't sort of comply to ideas of the female form and how the body should be flattered, like waist, hips. Is there something quite deliberate about that silhouette? Would you say it's in any way sort of, making a comment on how women are usually dressed, or where did it come from? Because it is very defined.
Yeah, I mean, it actually started, and like you were talking about the baby clothes, I did my BA collection, I found my baby dresses and I blew them up on a photocopier and then traced off the patterns. So I kind of had these sleeve heads that were, enormous, weird proportions, and that was kind of how that started, I suppose, that silhouette. I suppose I think about what I feel comfortable wearing, and I don't feel particularly comfortable in wearing kind of things that like a skin tight. I like to be able to like move around, and I always find that I feel much more comfortable in loose fitting clothes, so kind of really big pieces, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I think I like awkward silhouettes as well. I like when things are too big or too small, and you don't really get that when things are kind of bodycon, I suppose. Yeah.
It's interesting because we're kind of sitting here talking about all of this while this like storm is going on about like treatment of women in the fashion industry, sort of off the back of treatment of women in the film industry. And it's just, there's a lot of sort of tired cliches about women designing for women and all of that. But I'm interested just kind of as that rolls on around us, like what does it feel like to be sort of a young female designer in this industry at this time? And do you feel like you're sort of fighting against sort of expectations or stereotypes, or have you found it to be a very positive experience, or what's it like being young and female right now in fashion?
I think I've been very lucky. I think I've like never had. I don't think I've faced many challenges in terms of that, and I suppose in terms of kind of being like a businesswoman in fashion. I think, what was I going to say?
Big question.
It is a big question. It's hard to know kind of which angle to go on. I can't remember what I was going to say. I was going to say something about, I suppose for me like fashion is so fast and there's so much of it, and it is so about kind of like people having these kind of unachievable goals of being like perfect and beautiful and stunning. And I think I don't ever really want to create that kind of perfection. I think for me it's more about really having fun and like getting to know people. And I know that sounds a bit corny, but I just mean that like the process for me is not necessarily about making clothes that kind of make people look totally beautiful, which I mean it is that, but also I think it is so much about the process of how everyone feels during that process. And I know that does sound weird, but it's not necessarily about the final product. It's about like having a good time in the studio with the people I work with, and working with like women and making people feel confident and happy, rather than kind of trying to achieve this real kind of perfection, I suppose. I don't know if that's a good enough answer to that question.
No, that makes sense. And does that relate to how you sort of want the business to grow? Like, because, you know, what are your hopes for it? Because sometimes, you know, we all presume that to be successful in fashion means that you are bought by a big group and you have stores on Mount Street and you do a perfume and you know, all of that. And is that your version of success, or do you just sort of want to keep going as you are?
Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, my kind of thing at the moment is that I'd like to have a team of people that really like their jobs and have a job that they do, and it's just their job. Because in the beginning it was so much, you know, like I did everything and everyone did everything, and it was very blurred and very confusing. And I think success for me would be to have like a big enough studio to have a good party in, and to have like a group of people that I really like working with, and kind of, I suppose, to have the freedom to like do what you want. I think there's so many pressures to like make these collections that people want to buy and the shops want to buy, and I think for me success would be to be able to like to do that comfortably, but then to also do the kind of things that no one really wants to buy, and like be very creative, I suppose.
You sort of touched on the pace of fashion there, and do you find it quite relentless, sort of that pressure to make more and more and like more seasons? And I feel like everyone's kind of questioning that at the moment, like why do we need 4 seasons a year, all of that. But do you feel quite a lot of pressure?
I do, but I quite like the pressure, I think. I work better under pressure. So we did like a pre-collection last season because we did a show at the V&A, so it kind of coincided with that, so it made sense. But and I quite liked it because it just gave me that, like, I work best under pressure. So I was saying earlier that at the moment we've got like, I've kind of got the freedom now finally to just do my job, which I guess is designing and like making the clothes. And because it's like 4 months, 5 months ahead, the show, I'm kind of floundering, I don't really know what to do. So I'm trying to like find things that make me have deadlines. So I like it. And I think also like, it does move very fast and there are so many demands, but so long as you kind of know when to say no to them, I find it's all right. It's when you suppose you start doing kind of like loads of exclusives for things and lose track of what it is you're actually doing.
And you're sort of making work in response to sort of what other people are telling you they want to buy and stuff like that, and you don't really, I mean, that's, see that with brands sometimes, young designers, young brands.
Yeah, I think I've probably done that already a bit as well, but I think it's just, that's something that the speed of isn't so fun when they say, oh, we need this and this and this, but that's more kind of because it's such a pain in the ass for like my production manager and the factories. But yeah, I mean, I think the pace of it is quite fun because you can't really, I suppose you can't take everything too seriously sometimes. You have to sometimes just think, oh, it's, you know, it's one show of 1 million that's happening twice a year, 4 times a year, and like just get on with it and do it.
Yeah, do you ever feel slightly like that feeling of like shouting into the void? Because obviously there are so many shows and so many fashion weeks. Like it's always fashion week somewhere, you know. Someone's always going to a show. And do you ever feel a bit like just one tiny voice? And because I think you said a comment in another interview, which I thought was quite astute, where they were talking about you having a sort of specific style, and you said it's actually good to have a signature, particularly at the moment, like this, because it is hard to sort of get your voice heard when there's so many other young brands, and this thirst for the new can be quite stressful. How do you sort of cut through all of that noise? Yeah, I think it's very hard. I was saying it'd be nice if at Fashion Week there could be like a limit on how many looks people could do, and if everyone just could only do 20 looks per show, it'd be kind of be much better. But or just like 8.
Yeah, just 8, a little capsule. How do I cut through it? I suppose I think also what's a bit hard is that once you do one thing, people expect you to do that every time, and it's a bit boring. You kind of think, oh, actually, what if I want to do something totally different? And so kind of always having to think of another like twist on a show that we do can be a bit exhausting. But I think, I don't know, it sounds a bit silly, but I think so long as you kind of like have like belief in that one thing that you're doing, or even if you really hate it, like so long as you've got a kind of strong feeling about it, then I feel like it's okay to kind of keep on going. And yeah.
It was funny because when we were chatting backstage at your most recent show, you were like, I just kind of got a bit bored of Tool, like I just didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And do you ever have that where you kind of like, yeah, you sort of have that reaction to your own work? You know, some designers that say that in this interview series, they talk about how like they finish a season and then they hate it and they're like, ugh, just never want to look at it again. Do you, because people, I mean, you're sort of Mrs. Tool to so many people.
Yeah.
Like,
I am a bit sick of it though. It's like everywhere, and but no, not sick of it forever. I mean, I find it the easiest fabric to like have fun with and work with, so I will carry on with it. But I think often the shows are very much about they're kind of a whole, like a big project, I suppose. It's not just about the clothes. I'm always thinking about like how I'm going to present them at the end, what the show's going to be like, who that woman is that's wearing it, or whoever it is that's wearing it. And so I think if you think about it like that, you kind of, what am I saying? What am I saying? I don't know what I'm saying anymore. What were we talking about in the beginning?
we were kind of talking about trying to like, we kind of went on a bit of a ramble from like...
About the tool.
Yeah, the tool and like the sense of like moving forward from something and like having a distinct point of view, but being able to sort of develop.
Yeah, I suppose what I was going to say was that, which I don't know if it's that relevant, but that with each show there's always this kind of, I have this like end image that I imagine, like that person in that setting, whatever it may be. And so I suppose whatever it is that fits in with that fits. And so, you know, next time it might be that everything's tool. I don't ever really think about it too much, if that makes sense. But I do like to work very last minute, and that's why I'm struggling at the moment, because you kind of have too much time. And it's always the case with the first thing that I design and make for a collection, I scrap and it like all changes. So, but that's part of it, I suppose. Yeah. I don't know if that answered it again.
It does. Let's sort of go back, because I'm interested in your early life, and you've said that you like always wanted to be a fashion designer. Like it wasn't like there was this eureka moment where you're like, I should do fashion. It was like you were always obsessed with your clothes. Like,
yeah.
When you were a child, was that the case? Like you were very particular about what you wore?
Yeah, I think I was. Yeah, I think I was. And I think my mum dressed me in kind of quite interesting clothes, like either these like ridiculous smock dresses that she got from a charity shop, and I'd wear like 2 of those, or I either look like that or I look like a boy, half and half. So I think that's kind of probably what's fed into quite a lot of what I do now, maybe. But yeah, I used to design lots, and you know, like was obsessed with kind of like looking at music videos and magazines, and I think I remember quite young and like learning about Galliano and loving everything that he did, and then finding out that he went to St Martin's and that Louise taught him. And so I kind of think I remember when I was doing my GCSEs that I thought, oh, I want to do that. I want to like do what Galliano did and work with Louise. And but never that I wanted to do my own brand. I don't think that was really a thing for me so much. I just thought I wanted to work with, make things. Yeah.
Do you say you're ambitious? Because when you talk about things, it seems like your process, that things happen in a very organic, quite spontaneous way. And with this thing of, you know, your own labels almost kind of happening. And I wonder, a lot of designers are ambitious, you know, they want to get somewhere, they want to achieve a certain goal, whereas it feels like you're much more relaxed in a certain way.
I don't know. I think I probably am. Oh, I don't know. I think I am quite ambitious. I think like with the shows, we always have a very, very limited budget, but we kind of like achieve what we want to achieve always. I don't know if that's ambitious, but I never really settle for like, in terms of what we put out there. But And I think also to kind of run a business, you have to be pretty like, because it is a business, I suppose, and you have to like think about that stuff. And I suppose you have to have a certain amount of ambition to do that, and you have a lot of responsibility because you employ people. So I suppose that means you have to kind of push yourself and do a bit more than you feel maybe comfortable doing sometimes. Yeah.
So how did the own label sort of, I know it kind of began with you doing quite an impromptu show, but how did you go from being like, oh, I probably don't want to do my own label, something you didn't think about, to suddenly, you know, having your own label? Yeah. How did that happen?
I suppose when I was on the MA, you kind of got a bit, I think people like, it wasn't very cool to say you wanted to do your own label.
And that was at Central St. Martin?
Yeah. How did it all start, is what you mean? Yeah, well, it's quite a long story, but I was on the MA, and then I, with Louise Wilson, and then I was kind of doing really shit work, and I was not really sleeping and very depressed. So I took a year out and I deferred, and then I went back a year later and was kind of really excited to show Louise what I'd done. And then it was very sad because she passed away on the Friday and I was going back on the Monday. So it kind of, you know, it all changed, and very sad time, I think. And then went back for a month maybe, and with Fabio, the new tutor, and ended up just like going back to doing terrible stuff, and no one really knew what I was doing there.
Why was it so terrible? What was it like?
Oh, it was just crap. I think I thought that I had to make I thought I had to change everything that I'd ever done, and start again, and make everything had to be like an angle and like cut out, and and I wasn't very me, I think. And that's what I realised. That's kind of the biggest thing I learned. I didn't really learn anything while I was there, apart from when I left, that's what I just should have been doing all the time, the thing that I knew how to do and did best. But what was I saying? So then you fail. You have to pass the first year to get into the second year, and I failed. So, which kind of I think was a relief to me, because I knew that I just wasn't having a good time. And then so that was in the kind of July, I suppose. And then in September or in August, I was talking to my boyfriend, and he said, why don't we just do a party and make some clothes and everyone can wear them? And so we did it. And I think it was so that, because I'd kind of had like years and years of, well, it'd been almost 3 years doing the MA, or 2 years, I can't figure it out. But, and I kind of felt like I had nothing to show for it, because I was tearing up all my sketchbooks every night and stuff like that. So, so I spent a month at home in my kitchen sewing dresses, and my friends would come over and try them on, and then we rented a little church hall in Mayfair during Fashion Week and had a party, and people came, and we emailed, some press came and stuff like that. And then we got an order from IT Hong Kong and Dover Street Market like a week or so after. But I had no studio and no team or anything, or I don't even know if I'd kept the patterns of the dresses I'd made. I kind of had to start again, and suddenly had these big orders to do. So then I spent, I think, a month. I borrowed my mum's spare room, which was only about this big, and worked from 8 a.m. till midnight every day for a month, just making the production pieces, which was very stupid, because I probably could have got a factory.
Did you have a moment where you're like, oh God, this is like a runaway train, now I've got my own label, do I actually want my own? Have you ever had that point where you've been like, do I want to do what I'm doing, or is it just kind of all
I think sometimes when you do a lot of interviews and stuff, or you go for funny, I don't know, I suppose there's certain things that you're like, oh, if this is what it's all about, this is kind of sad.
Say that in the middle of an interview.
Not this is a nice one. I just mean there's certain things that you kind of you're obliged to do, and you're a bit like, oh God, this is shit. But I think, no, I've never really had that thought. It was quite fun, and I suppose I think that's what's weird. You don't have time to think, and you don't have time to think, oh, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to start a label, and so I need that and that and that and that and this amount of money and all of that. It just started, and I think we've just been very lucky the way we figured it out.
Do you think failure is really important? Because people never talk about failure, but actually it seems like failure was really important to you, being bad at something or not doing something well, or as you say, not passing that year.
Yeah. And I think, you have to do things badly sometimes, otherwise you never really know what's good anymore, I suppose. I remember I thought the last collection was 2 weeks before, I thought it was the worst thing in the whole world. I thought it was horrible. I hated it. And then I changed my mind, came around to it. But I think you have to have a moment of like,
you can have a bad season, can't you?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know, a season that people aren't a fan of, and
yeah, I suppose that's scary though, because then you have to have the buyers have to buy it, and I think also like, you know, around like it's been like 3 years now, I suppose, and I think this is the time where people kind of can get a bit bored of what you're doing, and or like I don't know, maybe the kind of good luck and the kind of maybe it was all a fluke. That's what I kept on thinking. But then you know, I think somehow. I mean, people bought it this season, so it's all right.
It's an interesting point you make there, though. Like, I think it's a particular thing in London. Like, you know, we love the new designers. Like, that's the story. Like, the young, the new, and you do see it sometimes where there's like press, and then after about, you know, 5-6 seasons, you're not the new young thing anymore, and there can be a bit of a lull.
Yeah.
And is that? Are you worried about that? Do you feel that sort of? And you see it with people who were the hot young thing and then they just drop off the schedule eventually.
Yeah.
It's really sad to watch that happen, and press is so fickle. And is that a concern for you?
Yeah, I think it's an unfair world in a lot of ways, because I think people do like hype you all up and then they kind of move on to the next thing. But I think we managed, fingers crossed, to avoid that for the moment by not like saying yes to every opportunity that comes your way, because I think that's the thing, people like ask lots from you, and then if you do it all, you kind of lose.
Yeah, it's like, what do you do after you've done it?
Yeah, and you can't maintain that. So like, I think we said no to like a lot of big shops that wanted to like buy the collections, or like online shops and stuff like that, and by kind of saying no early on, it I think has really meant that we've been able to kind of survive and like grow at our own pace, which I think is really important. I think it can happen very fast, I suppose. Yeah.
And just going back to when you were small, just talk to me about, you know, you mentioned that you loved Galliano, and what would you say were some of the biggest influences on you? Because family seems very important to you. You know, obviously you work very closely with your sister who styles your shows, and is that something that has really shaped your aesthetic? And like, you know, you talked about referencing your own clothes. Like a lot of designers talk about, when they talk about their inspirations, they're quite abstract things, whereas it feels like yours are quite close to home.
Yeah, I think I'm still figuring it out a bit, but I think it's a lot to do with people. I'm maybe starting to realise, like, I never kind of do a collection based on like a painter or flower. It's more like the idea of a person, and often that person is like someone from my childhood, or like something from, you know, like, or an adult I looked up to, or another kind of world that I like never really knew. I don't know, like, it sounds a bit vague and a bit silly, but I find it a bit more real in a way than I like kind of imagining other people and what they'd wear, and then relate that to what I want to wear. But yeah, I think a lot about family. I think I was lucky and grew up in a kind of very creative house, and I think I like the idea. I think I like the kind of tradition of like making clothes. It wasn't really a big part of my family, but I think like my great granny used to knit jumpers for me and stuff like that, and my mum always appreciated kind of smocked dresses and things that had kind of a lot of care and attention in them, and I think I've kind of taken on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We did an interview, the same series, with Mark Le Bon recently.
Yeah.
And I asked him, like, you know, how would you define yourself? And he said, oh, I'd like to be thought of as a family man. And it was a really interesting, like, everyone here's like, I'm a photographer, or I'm a, you know, whatever, like, family, think about career. And it's kind of, I kind of see similarities between sort of, you know, him and you, like this sense of like a creative household and making things, and that sort of, you know, sense of community around you and the people around you. And that's what's really important. And that quite sort of, I mean, cozy makes it sound really like a bit twee, but it's that kind of feel of keeping things close to you and like working with your sister and thinking about your...
It's not very cozy. We kind of argue quite a lot and shout at each other quite a lot. It's a bit of like, I think it's quite weird when someone from like the outside comes into one of our meetings and we kind of like don't really know how to communicate with each other, but yeah, I mean, I think also one of the things that has been quite an important thing in like the way we do things is, or the way I do things, I would say we, meaning like my team, not the royal we, but they, what was I saying? Very resourceful, I think, and like that's something I grew up with. Like I liked, like it was always very resourceful. Like it wasn't, like buying things from charity shops and like customizing things. It was kind of very much, that was a big thing. But I don't know why I was saying that again. Sorry.
That's okay.
Quite
that's the way your mind works. You're like, where am I going? But talk to me also, like, it's kind of also relates to your upbringing, because you're from London, you're from West London, you know, so
yeah.
kind of like, you know, a lot of people who show at London Fashion Week have come a long way to show at London Fashion Week. You know, they've come from a different country or whatever, whereas you've not really gone anywhere and you've sort of stayed put. And that's also quite interesting, like, what role has London and that particular sort of West London, because also like on paper it's like not very cool, you know.
No, it's not very
like,
cool.
Posh West London thing that you talk about in some of your interviews, you know, talk about like enjoying like the posh people in that community, and it's kind of, it's not cool. Like you're meant to be like East London and edgy, and just tell me a bit about that.
I mean, I think the funny thing is that West London, I grew up in Ladbroke Grove, so it's kind of, it didn't used to be posh, and now it is very posh, but it is still kind of, I still think it's really interesting. Like, it's really frustrating because it's becoming so gentrified and always has been, but it's because of the film, Notting Hill. I think that's what happened.
I love that film.
But literally after that, it became a whole new thing, I think. But I still find it an interesting place to live because there's so many, like there's the market and there's like strange people that still live there and have always lived there, and it's quite nice and it's like clean and like it's a nice place to go around on the weekends, but it is a crap place to live now for like nightlife. There's like nowhere I want to go out there, and even the pubs are quite annoying. But then when I was younger, it wasn't a problem because I was like, you know, I was living at home, so it was free. And I think growing up in London has played a very important part in like everything, because I was thinking about it earlier, but like it's quite funny that like in terms of nightlife, I had so many different groups all around London that were so different that I would go out, and I used to go out like every night when I was about
quite
15.
Spoiled if you live in London in that sense of the wealth of experiences that you can encounter at really young age are sort of quite enormous, whereas a lot of people find inspiration in sort of the mundanity of not being from sort of like, you know, a small place that they grew up. Whereas you kind of come from that. It's quite actually rare to have London Fashion Week designers who are London born and bred. So it's kind of, you're an interesting example for that. Yeah, I don't know. But talk to me a bit, because you've given in other interviews you've done, you have talked about like, I guess like the sense of English eccentricity that I find really interesting in your work, because it is very English in some way, and a lot of it, and the girls, there's a sense of like, and you've talked about, you know, finding sort of like certain manners or appropriateness interesting, and do you think, I see it as being very English, and that
England's
kind of,
weird though. That's why I'm interested.
Just talk to me a bit about that.
I don't know. England is quite weird. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm quite interested in, like, there's very weird things that happen in England, like vegetable shows. Like, that's just, you know, like those things make me, you know, and kind of like weird toys that people have made, and there's certain things that I feel like only exist in England, and that, like, you can't really explain them to anyone else.
No,
like, I remember my friend's boyfriend, he was American, and he came to like this vegetable show, like a horticultural show, and he just
couldn't understand what
I didn't understand it, and he started eating all the cakes because he thought they were offerings, and it was just very, I don't know, there's just, I mean, that's one thing. I can't think of anything else, but there are other weird things.
But I felt like that particularly, your last show, it feels very much about that. And a particular kind of, almost like a slightly like aristocratic Englishness thing with those, you know, like just how eccentric certain people. And it feels like that's kind of a part of part of the character of your girl, not you yourself, is kind of wrapped up in that oddness and that eccentricity that is impossible to sort of label. And I just wonder where that's come from, because
I don't know where that's come from, because I'm not part of that thing. But maybe that's what kind of interests me. I quite like thinking about people that live these kind of grand lifestyles, I suppose. And I suppose a lot of the shows have been quite about that. But then I think some things have also been, I mean, we did that sandwich factory thing, and that was kind of about being like more like a broke teenager who had to do a summer job. But yeah, I mean, also I think fashion is quite in that world, isn't it? So it's fun to kind of display that in a kind of, in a different way and in a more kind of obvious way. I think people pretend it's maybe not like that, but it kind of is like that. Sometimes, for some people, not everyone.
Talk to me a bit about some of the women who wear your clothes, because particularly Rihanna seems to be your like brand ambassador.
Yeah, she does.
How did that happen?
I don't know. I mean, I met Mel Ottenberg, her stylist in New York, like a couple of years ago, I think. And then, but like it was arranged. I went to meet him in a hotel lobby, and then I guess he's, I don't know. I think it's up to him.
So good.
She does look good, and it's nice because she buys them. So like, or someone buys them for her, and I just think she's quite on it. She kind of knows what.
Supportive of young brands, isn't she?
Yeah. And we make her things occasionally.
Why does it look so good on her, do you think?
I think because she kind of doesn't give a shit.
It just looks like a cake sometimes. You know, when she was wearing that blue one, it was kind of amazing. Is there someone who you'd really love to dress that you've not had the chance?
Well, I'm really bad at this question. I never know the answer. I never know. I don't know. I never know.
Be someone dead, if that helps. It doesn't have to be a current person.
Oh, no, I never know the answer. It's one of those things a bit like when you can't remember like what film you want to watch.
Yeah.
You think of them all the time, and then the minute you have to like...
But maybe it means, do you care that much about, I mean, I guess you don't really have a style of girl, like the fact that you can have like Edie Campbell in your campaign, but then Rihanna wearing it, like do you kind of, maybe there isn't a fixed type of woman, maybe that's...
No, I don't think there is, I suppose. I don't think there is that one muse, so to speak. I like to think of, you know, I'd really like it if my granny wore my things, but she's tried them on before, but she doesn't understand it. And then, I don't know, for me, I'd like it if all my friends wore it, but no one can afford it.
Well, that's actually a question I was going to ask, is there a strange, because you talked a lot about like drawing inspiration from the people around you and what have you, and there is that strange thing, you see it with sort of younger designers often, where they are looking at their friends, but then they're making clothes that no one of their peer group could afford, and that must be quite a strange sort of dichotomy to be in that position.
Yeah, I think it's really hard, because it's really hard to make clothes that are cheap, and like you shouldn't really make clothes that are cheap because it costs, you know, it's hard to make something for less than kind of £50, and then in the shop that's £150, if not more, you know. I think it's very hard to make something for £50 actually, and then, but I don't really know. I suppose you've got to kind of give things to people, but there is no other way. I don't really know what the other way is unless you do a kind of high street collaboration. I don't know. I think for me, I am interested in the fact that like this kind of range plan that you have to do, and I'm interested in making things that people can wear and then making things that people can't really wear. And I think that's what that's also what would be my dream, to make more of those things. And
would you like to go down a route of doing things like costume and, you know, maybe things for film or art pieces? So when you say things that people can't wear, how would they exist then? Just on the runway?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I don't like the idea that people look at a runway collection and imagine themselves wearing it or buying it, because I don't think it should be like that necessarily. I think some things, yeah, but I like the, you know, I used to look at shows and just think of them as kind of like these amazing spectacles that were just so inspiring, and then you'd go home and, you know, go home, or I didn't go to shows, I mean like looking in magazines and stuff, and then, you know, you'd do your makeup differently based on what it was in the show, or you'd like try and find something in your wardrobe that looked vaguely like something there, or go out and try and make something. And I don't love the new idea that you kind of, because I think it is quite a new thing that you, like, what you see you can have.
You like shop the look.
Yeah, I don't love that idea. But so when I say things you can't really wear, I just mean things that are, you know, we've made things that kind of can't sell for anything less than about £4,000, which is like so much money. So not many people are going to be able to buy that. But I really appreciate that like shops do sometimes buy those things. And even if they're just for like to draw people in and they're in the window and they look amazing. And like there's one dress at the moment that's in shops that is kind of made out of this cotton organdy, and it's just so stiff. You can wear it, but it's kind of like paper. But it is my favourite thing. And I think finding the balance is hard. But I wish that I could make more affordable clothes.
But it's interesting because it feels like you kind of see, particularly like talking about those pieces in the show, it's like you see them as being, they are for a broad range of people. It doesn't matter if they can't buy them. It's this idea that they can be entertained by them or inspired by them. It almost seems like you're saying, you know, someone could be like a Molly girl, even if they could never afford your clothes, because they could take on the aesthetic, or they could try and replicate it through something they found elsewhere.
Yeah.
That's quite an interesting idea.
Yeah, or just feel like more comfortable wearing something that they would normally not wear, or I don't know, think about colour differently, or think about like ways of wearing dresses differently, I suppose. Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit, just going back before, like kind of when you were studying, talk to me about some of the places that you worked and you interned, because you worked with Galliano and Medium Kirchhoff, is that right? Just talk to me about those placements and the impact that they've had.
I don't know. I actually worked at Giles Deacon as well when I was about 15. I did like my work experience there, and then I went back every now and again and did shows, and that was fun. I really liked being there. I mean, I think I remember being there and kind of like I'd cut a dress out, and then for production, these like placement print dresses, and then going into selfridges and seeing it on the rail, and that being like the most exciting thing in the world, that I'd had some part of that final dress. And then Galliano was fun because it was in Paris, and being like with the atelier, I worked a lot in the basement with the atelier, and that was really fun to see that, and kind of being a bit like thrown in at the deep end, and we used to just like copy vintage things and make them in a Galliano fabric, and kind of that was hard. And just I think it was a fun time. I mean, I shared a bed with my friend Annie for 3 months, and then and she worked at Dior and I worked at Galliano, so we'd kind of share stories, and I remember like Stephen Jones coming in, and it was just really exciting. It was really exciting, and seeing how things were made, and I learned a lot about kind of like cutting actually, and like bias cutting and dégradé. That was a big thing. That was a word that was used a lot. And then Mediam Kirchhoff was really good because it was in London, and it was fun. I mean, I think they both were quite good internships because I did a very varied mixture of things. I did like lots of errands and then lots of making. But I'm not sure I learned enormous. I didn't kind of take in, which I wish I had done, like what it actually means to like run. You don't really take note of like actually what's going on.
Especially if you're not planning on having your own label.
You're kind of just yeah.
But kind of quite difficult placements in a way also, because I mean Galliano obviously is someone who you saw the effects of the sort of the pace of the industry.
Yeah.
And same with Mediam Kirchhoff. You know, that label really sadly is no longer around. And was there any element of spending time in those companies that has also, you know, been something of a warning sign, and does it not scare you? That's really intense, but were there elements of being there where you saw that sort of darker side of fashion and how punishing it can be?
I would say maybe that one of the things I learned was to be very nice to people, because I'd like to think I'm quite nice to people, but the people that work for me, but, you know, I do remember at Galliano being kind of like, you know, the guy in charge of us would make us stay really late even though there was nothing to do. And those, you know, like that, I don't think you can really run a business if you treat people like that. Not run a business, but I don't think like you can maintain it if you do treat people like they're not that, you know, don't really value everyone that works for you. And I think it happens so often in like fashion that everyone is expected to like work incredibly late the whole time. And actually I just find it really unproductive doing that. So, but I suppose that's what I was saying. I didn't really take note of that side of things. I just thought it was like fun to be in that fashion and making clothes. And I didn't really look at that side of things it's hard to notice it.
Would you ever want to go to a big house?
I don't know.
Have to be the right one.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, it'd be fun. I mean, I quite like designing to a brief sometimes. So like, and I'd be very excited to see the archives of certain places. But I don't know. That would be a very long way off, I imagine.
Do you have sort of shorter term goals or pipe dreams that you're like, I need to achieve this, that will be success for me? Or
no, not really.
No, you just kind of
I think at the moment it's very much about things have always been quite hard, like very hard work, you know, it's like always a challenge and always a stress and always, so like to be able to do a show and it kind of just goes smoothly would be like, that's success for me, I suppose. And the last one was actually quite smooth.
You seemed really happy afterwards.
Yeah, I was quite chilled. We had some champagne before and I think that was really...
Like I was wasted.
It was just very helpful. I mean, it really made it run a lot smoother, I think.
Do you read reviews or do you try and avoid all of that?
Yeah, I do.
Do you?
Yeah.
You find it okay?
Yeah. Never had any really bad ones.
It's another reason to be nice to people.
Huh?
It's another reason to be nice to people.
Yeah, that's true.
So what's next then?
What is next? Well, we've moved studio, which is really exciting. We've moved to East London.
Oh my gosh.
So that might be that might make a change to some, I don't know what. It's really good. It's a big, beautiful space. So I don't know what's happening. The next show is the first show that we don't have sponsorship from the British Fashion Council, like New Gen officially, I don't think. So kind of that's quite fun in a way, because I suppose it feels like we've got a bit of freedom to kind of really...
Flown the nest.
Yeah, but also terrifying, because we need quite a lot of money to do it. But I quite like having a limit, you know, I find it quite...
Like you said, you have to be under pressure to do good
work. Yeah, and like, I feel like if I had an endless budget, I don't know, I would never be able to decide what to do. So it's quite good to kind of, I find it exciting, I suppose. Although it'd be nice to have a bit of a budget. But I think that's next. So yeah, we'll see what happens with the next show. Or if it all goes tits up because we don't have any money anymore, I don't know. We'll see.
I'm sure it won't. Thanks so much, Molly.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.